Like, oh, well, maybe we're not even in. Okay, there we go. All right. Donald, it's Off-Roading the West.
Jason.
Cheers. What a trip.
Phenomenal trip.
That's not even a trip. It was a journey.
A journey, a trek, an expedition, a voyage. It was, pick your most epic word, because
it was.
This was probably the most phenomenal trip that I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as backcountry overland adventures, this was a new high.
Well, I mean, that was because I was with you, right?
Sure.
I mean, the views, the amazing views, everything. It was just my company.
Okay, you know, the off-roading challenges, okay. But just getting to be with this, you know.
Donald, it's snowing.
It is snowing.
So anyways, guys, we just got back. We literally just pulled in. We're in Sisters, Oregon right now. We just drove, what, about 5.5, 6 hours to get just from where we stopped overlanding today.
Yeah, that's not even from where we got up.
That's
from our
not, yeah,
campsite this morning.
Exactly.
Which was, you know, 12, 13 hours ago at least.
Right.
Yeah.
So we actually woke up in the mountains this morning in an absolutely epic location, and we probably spent another 4 or 5 hours on the trail
just to get out of there.
Just to get out of the trail, and then we've spent another 5.5 or so hours on highway getting to this point. Donald still has. This is kind of my home base, Sisters, Oregon. Donald, you still have to get to Eugene.
I've got another, you know, maybe hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes of driving to get home.
Okay.
Which I'm just going to do tomorrow morning.
Right.
Yeah.
And we get here, and I mean, literally, I threw a quick fire together. We've got the van. Megan's actually here as well, and we got Daisy. I don't know if you guys can see her or not. She's laying between us. But we get to Sisters, and as soon as we get here, it starts snowing. So, man, the interest never stops on this trip.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, ultimately we had fairly mild weather.
Right.
All throughout Eastern Oregon. I was prepared to be cold, but it was reasonably warm. I think it looks like tonight here, back almost home, is going to be our coldest night.
Our coldest night, yeah.
Of the week.
So, anyways, yeah, so I've been out for 2 weeks. You guys know this from the last podcast that I did, the Bend to Alvord with Edward, and so I was 5 days on the trail with Edward, and then at the Alvord Desert, Megan came with Daisy, and we hung out for a couple days, and in that same couple days, Donald showed up and hung out with us for an evening, and then Sunday morning, Megan left with Daisy, and me and Donald continued on from the Alvord all the way to the Owyhee River, along the river, and all the way up until we got to a state park on the Owyhee Reservoir, which was another 300 miles of amazing backcountry travel. And we both, you know, spent tons of time filming. I've obviously got a little backlog of the Bend to Alvord with Edward that I'll be showing you first, and then I'll have the videos from this, and you have a little backlog of videos yet to do, right?
I do, yeah. So it'll be a while before mine come out.
Yeah. So, but then we basically, so we'll talk about the trip a little bit more, but yeah, we got here and it's snowing, which is really unexpected. I was just not prepared for this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first snow that I've encountered this season.
Yeah. So this is great. So we get to have a little podcast with you guys. Again, this is going to be kind of a podcast style video. You know, we've just everyday travel, videoing. We've got tons of content for you, but just like I said, just don't have time to edit anything or put anything together before trying to get something out for, actually, we're recording this on Saturday night. It will post tomorrow, which will be Sunday, is when you guys will be watching it. But yeah, very kind of an interesting twist to our podcast. I'd hope to have a nice little campfire podcast, but to have some snow falling down extra little bonus.
Definitely a bonus.
Yeah. So anyways, you did last year, Donald did the Bend to Alvord. How was that?
Well, it's funny because when we did the Bend to Alvord, I think when we got to the end of it, I was like, I don't remember, I had one word. It was
exhilarating.
Exhilarating.
Exhilarating was the word.
Because that trip, at that point, was the most incredible overland trip that I had ever taken. And that route is amazing. The scenery is spectacular. The backcountry is just, it's remote. You're just out there by yourself. There's interesting stuff that we run across along the way. It's just a fantastic trip already. Just the Bend to Alvord.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but now we've done this trip.
Now we've done this trip. And going from the Alvord, and we worked our way sort of through the southeast corner of the state, sort of gravitating around the Owyhee River and the Owyhee Canyon, and it was next level. I think that's the word that I used. It was next level. The scenery was beyond spectacular. Some of the trails and the sort of like off-roady challenges that we ran into were surpassed anything that we encountered on the Bend to Alvord route. I mean, we really got into a few spots where we were like, can we get back out of here?
Right, yeah. Yeah, that first night.
Yeah,
first night's trail. That was definitely one that, I mean, I was confident we could get back out of there. I wasn't confident in going any further on it. Yeah, so, yeah. But man, yeah, and Donald's right. I think next level really, I love the Bend to Alvord. It is a great trip, and I think especially for someone that really wants to get into and do a real overland trip, and who maybe is, I wouldn't say beginner, but maybe wants to, you know, not like dive in off the deep end. I think the Bend to Alvord is a great trip. There's some technical aspects about it. It is definitely put you into some very remote terrain. You got some beautiful scenery. You've got some cool points of interest and everything. But then, like, once you've done that, if you want to step it up another level of, I think, even more remote,
more adventure,
more adventurous, more definitely more technical terrain, as far as, you know, rocky, steep, loose, you know, just loose, rocky, you know, steep terrain.
Yeah, just stuff that, I mean, it's stuff that, you know, frankly, if I was doing it in the Forester, I'm not sure that I would have done it.
Right.
There was bits and pieces of this trip that, I mean, I've pushed that Forester to all kinds of, you know, stupid places that I shouldn't have, and it always, you know, I always managed to get it through. But some of the stuff we hit on this trail, I think, was probably beyond the Forester.
Right. Yeah. In fact, to the point, you went last year into the Owyhee with the Forester, and you got to a certain point where you decided not to go any further because you were concerned whether the Forester would go out. And we went in that.
We went down the road where I balked and said, nope, that's not for me. And we went down there and we checked it out, and we obviously survived. Yeah.
Now, I don't want to give too much away on this trip because we have videos. We want you guys to watch the videos, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys kind of a idea of where we're at. Again, why we're doing a podcast, and just, we've been both very, very busy over the last week trying to create the best content of this trip for you guys. And I can attest that Donald worked very hard at gathering footage for you guys, and I've worked very hard at gathering footage for you guys. So we definitely will be having content start to roll out on the edited content rolling out on the channels very soon. But you know, this is kind of just I think an interesting way to kind of fill a little gap in the uploads, and also, you know, give you guys some, you know, thoughts and things like that. Now, because of this, you know, for me, this was 600 miles of off-grid travel. And And that's a lot. And you know, and I am very, 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 very happy with how the van performed on this. I could not be more ecstatic. But we did run into a couple little issues where we had to do I had to do a field repair. You had a little very minor
field repair.
Mine was minor. I mean, but
it was a little less minor than mine.
Yeah. But you'll have to see what had that. But I mean, I feel like this was a very big test of our setups.
Yes.
And on a scale of, let's just say 1 to 5, 5 being it was excellent, 1 being it was very poor, how do you feel like yours did?
Oh, like my setup?
Yeah, your I almost said Forester, but the Frontier.
Yes.
How did the Frontier well, let's actually do this differently. Let's kind of put a couple levels. So off-road capability of the Frontier, how did it do 1 to 5?
Well, I was thoroughly okay. 1 to 5. I mean, I have to give it a 5, right? It didn't get stuck. I got up every single thing that we got up. We went through some pretty deep mud holes, some pretty crazy muddy stuff, some pretty crazy steep rocky climbs, and as it is, it's completely stock. It's a stock Frontier Pro 4X. It's not lifted. It's got nothing other than, you know,
good tires.
KO2s.
Yeah.
You know, it's got good tires on it. That's the only upgrade on that truck. And it went absolutely every place that I wanted it to go.
Right.
Where I pointed it, it went. And even places where I was like, you know, I saw Jason drive through and I was like, there are things that I would never ever would have even tried, especially if I was out there by myself. It's like, oh, heck no, I'm not going through that. And the truck went through it just fine. So in terms of off-road capability, I mean,
couldn't be happier.
There's nothing I could knock down. I mean, really, the biggest thing was ground clearance for me.
Mm-hmm.
Was that there were a number of places on some of those steep, really rocky trails where I was hitting the bottom of the truck. Now the Pro 4X is equipped with factory skid plates, so I wasn't too worried. But clearly, the truck could use, you know, a little bit of lift.
Right. So really, it'd be a 4.
Okay, call it a 4.
Yeah.
A 4. I mean, I feel like if it went from beginning to end and I didn't get stuck, I didn't break anything, I didn't, you know, I feel like it did the whole thing just fine.
Right.
You know, it's like virtually off the factory floor.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I mean, but I was hitting bottom a lot. Okay, so yeah, call it a 4. 4.2.
Yeah. I mean, and the only reason why I'm saying that is because, like,
there is room for improvement.
There's room for improvement.
There's room for improvement.
Right. And so, but yeah, no, it did great. And so same thing with the van. You know, I give the van, you know, because the van's a very big animal, and I really wish this smoke wasn't like coming straight into my eyes right now. But this is the problem about doing a podcast with a fire, is dealing with smoke direction. Maybe if we can get it burning a little hotter again, it will maybe make a little bit less smoke. But the van did really well. Now the van, like I said, is a very big, it's kind of a lumbering beast, but it did very well. And I did some stuff with the van this trip that you know, was somewhat concerning. It was very, some of the terrain was very steep. The van's center of gravity is pretty high, so like some of that had some concerns, but
some
again,
off camber,
yeah, some off camber stuff.
Camber bits too. Yeah. Which is where it's like when I'm like driving behind him and I see, you know, this towering van going over these, you know, like jostling over these off camber trails. I'm like thump, thump, thump.
Yeah.
But it's fine.
So today, when that last trail we came down, that was a very narrow trail. And there was
road.
Yeah, it was a
drop off.
Yeah, it was a squirrely road that came down the side of a hillside, and I mean literally the hillside was like this. I mean, it was just a very, very, very steep, and you had this dirt road, and it was, I mean, nowhere to go on the other side. And there was one particular point I remember we went through, and it was a very rocky side, and I swear there couldn't have been this much room between the edge of my tire and the edge of the road going off the side. So the van is also, one of the challenges of the van is its width. Is you know, I saw that as a pro in your vehicle, especially on that one trail we were on the first night. That was a very rocky trail, and I felt like a narrower vehicle would be much better. And with the van being wider, I felt like it made it a little bit more challenging. So that is, you know, so as I'm kind of doing this whole scale, 1 to 5, 5 being great, 1 being the worst, you know, I kind of have to give the van somewhere around a 3.5 to 4 mark, only because of the fact that if you want to compare the van to, say, the Jeep Gladiator I took out, the RMT Jeep Gladiator, like, it just isn't going to compare to that. That vehicle's very nimble. It had bigger tires. It had a little bit more clearance. Its center of gravity is much lower. All those things, I would have to, you know, just the van isn't going to compare to that. So I'm going to give the van like a 3.5 to 4. But in the end, like Donald said with the Frontier, I got everywhere we wanted to go.
It did everything.
It did everything. It did it all. So now let's move on to like livability. So how would you rate the livability of your setup right now?
Okay, I'm going to give my livability maybe a 3.2. There's definitely, I mean, it worked out fine, and I was finding it was fortunate that it wasn't super cold, because my heater stopped working, and so you know, and it's not an insulated space like yours.
Right.
I don't have a built-in heater like yours.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's basically a little metal box instead of a tent. And so, and it's, you know, it's a small, it's a cramped space. I mean, it works out well for me, and I like it better than when I was using the tent by far.
Yeah.
Especially when some of those windy nights hit. Last night, and a couple nights before, also up on the you know, we had a couple of windy nights.
Yeah, a couple extremely windy nights. Yeah.
But there's definitely, I can see, especially this trip has opened my eyes to a lot of things that I want to change in the setup. So while it works, I mean, I have to say it worked very well. It's fast to set up, super fast to break down and get ready to get on the trail.
And that's important.
That is important.
That's extremely important in my opinion.
Well, it is important when you are also have to get up and start filming, you know, before the sun comes up.
Right.
And get all this content, and then get packed up and get on the road, you know, not ridiculously late, and actually, you know, make some progress also.
Yeah.
So speed is, I mean, it's always been a huge piece of the puzzle for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy with the speed of my setup and breakdown. There's a few little things in terms of livability, so yeah, I'm gonna give it. I'll give it a 3, because I feel like I've got a lot of room for improvement, and this trip especially, I've developed some ideas of how I'm gonna change the way that's set up to make it even better.
Right. Now, I'm gonna interject in there a little bit and say, yes, your setup is, comparing it to the setup you had for the Ben Alvord,
mm-hmm.
This was like, hands down, way better. Way better.
Yeah.
Way better.
Yeah, but, I mean, a 3 is maybe not fair.
Right. Well, but let me finish here. So but also I want to point out that this was a temporary build in the first place. Like, you never intended this build to be a finalized build. This was just to get you started with the new truck.
Once I got the canopy on the truck, I literally threw it together in a day, because in fact it was like, I just got the canopy and Jason was like, hey, we're going camping at the coast. Do you want to come join us? And I was like, well, I don't have a place to sleep. I guess I'll build a place to sleep.
Right.
And I've been using it ever since.
Yeah. So I did the same thing with the van. My first, when I first got the van, I had some concepts of how I wanted to put it together, but at the same time, I didn't want to put anything or spend a lot of money on anything permanent, because I wasn't sure. And I actually went through probably at least a half dozen different setups before I tore the van apart this last summer and built it the way I did, and actually put money into it and really tried to build it nice. Now, with that said, I'll give the van a pretty high score of 4.8 because it was great. Livability was amazing, and I couldn't be happier. There was a couple little things that I'm gonna have to fix, like my Propex heater did work every night, but the Propex heater has an intake and exhaust that come out from underneath the van, and I had problems with it getting clogged up with mud. So I'm gonna have to do some changes there. So what I ended up having to do was wrap every day before we leave for travel. I had to wrap it in a bag and tie wrap it and make sure that nothing could get in it. And then every day when we got to camp, I had to go out, cut the tie wraps and pull the bag off as a temporary solution. So that's part of the reason why I didn't give it a 5, because not everything worked perfectly. There's a couple other little things that on this trip I decided that, like my water system, I really like having running water, but I don't like the little faucet thing that I have. It has a tendency to leak a lot, so I'm going to change that a little bit. But you know, yeah, just having a space with hard sides, insulated with a heater, a cook stove inside, so that when, you know, like last night, it was literally rocking the van back and forth. It was so windy. So having a place that I could come inside and cook and not be out fighting the wind with the burners and everything and just being miserable, I couldn't be happier. So yeah, that was great. So where I gave the van a little bit lower score in off-road capability, its livability compared to, again, like that Jeep Gladiator that I took out, is far beyond that. Like the Jeep Gladiator had a rooftop tent, and that's great. It's a very usable setup. But when I went to because we went to the same area as I took that Jeep. In fact, we went much beyond that, but that same general area, and I dealt with wind and stuff there, and it was miserable. It was a miserable nights in the Jeep Gladiator because of being in the rooftop tent and the wind just blowing on the tent and material flapping all night. I had many sleepless nights. But in the van, even though it was so windy that it was literally rocking the van back and forth last night, it never cost me an ounce of sleep. Like, it was comfortable, it was warm, it was quiet, it was well worth to have that comfort was well worth whatever I was losing in off-road capability. And again, when I say what I lost in off-road capability, the van still went every single where we wanted to go.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really call it a loss.
Yeah,
really.
So it's so
right. It's not as capable as a Gladiator, but
right
for a whole entire living space that you have, this heated. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Where you can take this little home like pretty much anywhere.
Exactly.
Pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
So
yeah.
So that was good. I want to say here, I got to grab my phone and my glasses because I do have some questions or some things from Patreon. And what did I do with my glasses? I know I had them here. There they are.
Daisy sitting out here in the snow, getting all wet.
So I should have been a little bit more prepared, but like I said, we literally, I don't even think we've been here a half an hour before we started this podcast.
Yeah. Rolled in, built the fire, press record.
Press record. And I thought I had the questions right here, but maybe I've got internet now, so. I downloaded the questions because last time with Edward Shin, I had asked my patrons for a bunch of questions for these things, but then when I was with Edward, we didn't have any signal. And so what ended up happening is I wasn't able to see what that people wanted to know. So, and there was a couple of very interesting questions here that I did want to talk.
While he's looking for that, I will say, if you haven't already watched the Ben to Alvord videos, that's really an interesting series in terms of like leading up to this, because I don't know if it's 100% clear, but we picked up where we left off, and we're extending this route
exactly
on further. So one could theoretically set off from Bend, go to the Alvord, keep right on going up to the Owyhee Reservoir, where we ended up,
right.
today. And I mean that that would be, that would be already. I was just out there for a week, and I found it a little bit exhausting. And Jason just did the whole thing. You just did the whole thing.
Right, and I'm super exhausted. So that probably is why I'm a little bit slow trying to get some time. I'm super exhausted. I mean, because that was, every day of filming. Every day you're moving and you're filming. It's not just
from before the sun comes up until after the sun goes down.
Yeah. And for and like Donald said, like you're tired after a week, and this was my second week of doing it because I was with Edward before that, and then you add on the travel and just everything that you're doing along with it. But yeah, so I'm definitely feeling fatigued after all that, but it was great. So I have some questions here now. I kind of feel like some of this, this first question here, we've kind of covered, because it says all three of you, and she's kind of referring to Edward, but Edward's not here, so I'm just going to say, all three of you on your second builds since starting your overland content, how did your priorities change on the second build? So I wonder if I'm going to assume that you're kind of talking like me. I went from the Ford to the van. You went from the Subaru to the Frontier. Yeah. So kind of. You've covered this a lot on your channel, but kind of like when you were forced into the situation, it wasn't like you just decided to buy a new rig.
I decided to get rid of the Forester. I got hit by someone who ran a red light. Forester was totaled, so I had to go and buy a new vehicle.
Right.
And so the two things that I did want to change were, I wanted a little more off-road capability in terms of especially having a true 4x4 with a low range transmission, low range gearing.
Right.
And then just simply a bigger vehicle to better accommodate the stuff that I need to bring with me, and to be able to create a space that I could sleep in without pulling out a tent and setting up a tent each night.
Right.
And so those were the things those were the priorities of the second build, so to speak, was a little more off-road capability and a lot more space and sort of weatherproof camping capability. Right. Sleeping inside my canopy, like Jason said, the wind was insane last night, and the truck was just, if I had been in the Gazelle tent, that would have, it would have just simply picked tent and me up and just rolled us down the hill. And instead I was just like, oh, it's like getting rocked in a cradle. It was like, fine by me.
Yeah, so for me, going from the Ford to the van, a lot of that is kind of the same as, except for, so the old Ford and the van, off-road capability-wise, kind of the same. Not too much difference there. They both have the basic same capability as, a 4x4 vehicle. But the big priority to me was to have a living space that I didn't really have to set up. And I wanted to be able to go from the front seat into that living space without having to get out of the vehicle. And the main reason is like there was so many times that in the Ford, and when I had the rooftop tents or even the drifter trailer, that I would get somewhere and the heat had been already running in the Ford. The Ford's already warm. It's already comfortable. It's good. And then I would have to get out and set something up and, get the heat going. And, and if it was really miserable outside, which looks like our snow is kind of slowing down, but if it was really windy and miserable and raining outside, I would just often just sit in the Ford and go, man, I wish I could just crawl in the back right now. I didn't want. So that's one of the biggest things that always appealed to me about the van is being able to be driving, have the ambient temperature inside the van already warm and comfortable and inviting. And then just be able to park and get in and basically just get into the back, and everything's really already set up. Like I don't have to get outside. I don't have to do anything. It's just set up and ready to go. And if I get in somewhere kind of late, no big deal. I just crawl in the back, I slip in the bed, I go to sleep, and it's wonderful. So to me, that was kind of the driving force for going from the Ford to the van? And that question was from Patty, one of my patrons on Patreon. If you want to support the channel, that's a great way to do it, is through Patreon. She actually had a couple on. Here's another one. She said, what would be your dream overland trip? I kind of feel like I just did it, but
well, that was my best trip so far for sure. Yeah, dream overland trip. I don't know. I mean, there's all across the West. There's so much. There's so many states that I haven't visited yet. There's so much. There's Montana. Idaho has some insane mountain territory, and the Southwest is just spectacular, you know. And I just barely scratched the surface of that. I would struggle to put my finger on dream overland trip.
I think that would be a hard one for me too. I just love being out in remote spaces, and there's just so many opportunities in the Western states. And you know, we've done a lot within Oregon, so I wouldn't mind, just like you, I wouldn't mind exploring a bit more of Utah. I wouldn't mind exploring a bit more of Arizona, Montana. I mean, all the Western states have something. Nevada's kind of there's some places in Nevada that I've gone through on the highway, on the way to Overland Expo in Flagstaff. And there's an area that has a whole bunch of Joshua trees, and I always thought it would be really fun to like take a week and go back to that area and go back into that BLM and just explore through those Joshua trees in that desert country. So that's something. I think, yeah, just I don't know that I really have a specific dream, just more of it.
More of it, yeah. I mean, really, the dream overland trip is, you know, remote backcountry, spectacular scenery, just like empty, devoid of people, you know, and yeah, just like what we just did. Really.
Yeah. So I think this is an interesting question. This is again from Patty. If you were to start manufacturing a manufacturing company, what overland product would you make?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm first on this one?
I've been first on all the others.
Oh, well, I know, but it's because I'm interviewing you. No, so I would probably, one or two things. Even though I don't use the trailer anymore, I still like overland trailers. And so I would like to build, I think it would be fun to build a trailer, but I think at this point, like that would probably be second. And then I would love to be able to almost design a van from the ground up, which, you know, everything, the body, the frame, the way the suspension worked, the you know, and just to build the design that all the way from the ground up. This would be a huge deal. Like, obviously you're not like making a you know, a new cup or something. a new cup for my whiskey, but no, I just love vans, and you know, and I love the Ford platform, especially the E350 platform. But I see so many little things that could have been, if they were just a little bit better, would make it a little bit better design. And so I'm always thinking as I'm out in the van, like, what can I do? What if I had all the money in the world and I could just start from the bottom up, like all the things I would do to make the ultimate overlanding van. So if I mean, that's probably not at all a realistic manufacturing dream, but like that's what I think about all the time, is like how to make the perfect van, how to build the perfect van.
Yeah, okay. I think for me, I mean, I think what really excites me is vehicle specific products, something that's designed to fit perfectly into the space, to mount to the bolts that exist, you know. And there's so much. I mean, if you have a vehicle that's not super well supported in the aftermarket, you just have to DIY so much of it. But the handful of companies that I've crossed paths with that truly like build to, you know, so that their product is like designed to fit the vehicle, I think that's really a nice thing to have. And the thing that I guess I've done recently that I'm super happy with is just, you know, this fridge support with these drawers below it. So I've got, and then it bolts into my truck. It's like I built it to fit my truck. Nothing like it exists in the world. But I feel like other people with other vehicles would like to have something where they could mount their fridge and have a bunch of, you know, organized storage space. So that's sort of like vehicle specific and like organization, you know, getting stuff where you need, because that's such a, when you're living out of a vehicle for a week or 2 weeks or, you know, all the time, having a specific place for every single thing is so critical.
Right.
And so that's that kind of thing really, I guess, excites me, is being able to get, you know, to use that old phrase, a place for everything, a place for everything and everything in its place. But it makes all the difference when you're out, you know, on the trail, and even, you know, if you're show up and camp and it's dark and it's late and you're fumbling around, but, you know, I need my headlamp, I need my this, I know exactly, I go here, I know which drawer it's in, I grab it, and I'm not fumbling around, I'm not digging through bins. So I think that, you know, that if I was to get into manufacturing, which I have no intention to, but if I were, it would be sort of along those lines, vehicle specific, you know, organization.
And I mean, I think that's extremely, I do agree, that is critical, it's important, because having your stuff not only organized in a space, but organized in such a way that it's going to handle travel off-road.
That's another,
you
good
know,
point.
You know,
the stuff's getting jiggled around,
right, yeah.
thrown around.
I have had many times things get broken during travel just because they were not secured well and they kind of moved around. So yeah, organization, you know, or things that are having things organized, but not just only organized, but organized in a way that they're not going to get damaged during the travel. Yeah. I think that's important. So yeah, I think that's really good. So Richard Foote, he asked and I think I can only think of one, because there's only been really a couple times that we've all three been together, but he wanted to know the most memorable camp trip when it comes to all three of us being together, and that would be me, you, and Edward. And for me, like we did a snow camping trip, but there was actually a lot more people. But yes, the three of us were in that trip, and that was very memorable. But I mean, recently, and we all have videos on this. We just did a camp trip this last summer, just over here, up in the mountains, and that was the very first trip that it was just the three of us hanging out around a gas fire because it was summer. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll have definitely more, but
it's hard to get all those schedules.
Right, it's very difficult.
Between Edward and Jason and me, it's hard to get us all linked up. So we haven't had that many opportunities for us all to get together. I get together with Edward sometimes. Jason gets together with Edward. I get together with Jason.
Right. But the three of us
together is especially challenging. It's only happened a couple of times.
So let's narrow it down. So what's the most memorable trip that just the two of us have done?
Well, now it's got to be this one, right? It's got to be this one.
I mean, I would have said the Ben Alvord last year, but this one was different because, and you brought this up earlier. This is actually more from your mouth than mine, but I think it's very true. Is last year on the Ben Alvord, it was a great trip, and and in fact, I'm even going to still say the Ben Alvord, and I'm going to say it for this one reason. The one reason is after we did the Ben Alvord and we had spent all that time together, I knew like that I enjoyed doing stuff with you. Like, like that was a hard trip. We had some severe weather. We worked together well. And even though this trip on many levels was next level, that was the trip that like solidified the fact that, you know, that I enjoyed, that I could trust and do that type of level of trip with you.
That's a good point. That was sort of a turning point in us working together. And
because it's one thing to go out for a one-nighter, do something like that, but to go through everything that we went through and filming and not be like getting angry with each other.
Get to the end of it and not like be like...
You know, it's
hating
like
each other.
Yeah, it's like at the end of the Bend to Alvord trip was when I was like, you know, like I you know, Donald is somebody that I can trust in the backcountry to be able to handle himself, get along with him, and all those things. So on that level, I will say that I will continue to say that the Bend to Alvord is, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily the most memorable in the fact that, like, this one was next level in many things, but it was the one that made me like, okay, when I plan overland trips, I'm talking to Donald, you know, to say like, hey, let's, you know, do you want to, I'm thinking about this trip, you want to do this? And that's exactly how this trip kind of came about was, hey, you know, I've got this idea to extend the Bend to Alvord. Do you want to do this with me? You know, and, you know, and so we started working it out, and, you know, we figured out waypoints together. We kind of figured out routing, and, you know, and discussed all that stuff together, and made this trip happen. And, you know, what made this trip kind of interesting is what you were saying is when we did the Bend to Alvord, I'd already done it. So I already knew all the roads, went through, I already knew what we were going to be seeing. I didn't expect the weather and stuff that we had, but I knew many of the things that we were going to run into, so I kind of had a good understanding of the route. This trip was all fresh. We had a route, but, you know, we didn't have any guarantees that the roads would go through. We did have an issue there, you know, and we had to work to figure out a new route around that. And, you know, we didn't necessarily, in some places Donald had seen some things, in some places I had seen some things on another trip, and then we had that information. But then there was a lot of the trip that was just like, we didn't know until we got there, and we were pleasantly surprised. I mean, and that's putting it very mildly. We were massively excited and surprised on many of the things that we just came across. Yeah. You know, so I think finding those things together for the first time, like, that's an extra level of that adds like an extra level of memorability to the trip, and the fact that, like, when we got to Shirk Ranch, I'd already been there. That was exciting for you.
It was.
But I'd already been there, and it's still, I enjoy going there every time. But when we found some of the things that we found on this trip, it was the first time either one of us has seen it. So it was both of us being excited, like, oh my God, look at this. This is amazing.
Yeah. And over and over. And I mean, that for me is why this past week becomes the most memorable, because we were out there. I mean, yeah, we hit some places that you had seen. Mm-hmm. We hit some places that I had seen. We crossed some routes that we both had done before. But there was a bunch of it that was new terrain for both of us. And we were just, you know, some of it was just improvised, like, oh, that looks interesting. Let's go check that out.
Right.
And so we would just go and check that out, which is something that, I mean, you and I have never really done together before.
Right.
And that sort of sense of discovery and adventure and, you know, not knowing what's coming next, I think is part of what took this trip, like I said before, to the next level.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it makes this trip the most memorable for me.
So I'm gonna end the podcast with one last question that we're probably not really going to answer, which is, I know, very mean, but Gary Ark on my Patreon wanted to know. He said, "Thanks, Jason. Not being from the U.S., I'd love to hear you guys talk about the history of the area you are traveling through." And the reason why I say we probably won't answer that question is because we want you guys to watch the videos, and we've both done some research, and we'll both be in our video series sharing historical information on the areas that we're going through, and some of the points of interest that we found. So Gary, that's a great question, but yeah, we'll do a please watch the series,
watch the videos,
and watch Donald's series, and and watch Donald's, and Donald talked kind of that's before, but last year Donald did an amazing job creating a series about our Bend to Alvord trip, where he did talk a lot about the history of a lot of the places that we visited along that trip, and he did just a beautiful job of putting that together. So if you haven't checked out his channel, definitely check out his channel. I'll make sure there's a link at the end of this video that you can click on, go right to his channel. Look through, you got a playlist on that for that one? Yep. So look for his Ben Alvord playlist. Absolutely top-notch set of videos if you haven't seen them. But then again, at the same time, you know, make sure to check out our new videos that we're going to come on this one. And again, we'll both be kind of putting in some tidbits of history that we can find, because there's some of the stuff that we found that we didn't know was out there. So we found it and we don't know anything about it. So we're going to have to do some digging before the videos go out, because we're not really sure. So we're going to have to do a little digging on some of that stuff. There's a few things that like we knew we were going to hit, and we had done some pre-digging, but then there's some things that we kind of found along the way that we didn't know anything about, and that we're going to have to do a little bit of research on. Yeah. So, but anyways, guys, I hope you found something in this podcast. Oh, wait, you know what? We didn't talk about pooping in the woods.
Wait, is Edward Chin here?
Yeah, where's Edward at? We need Edward. So Donald has started to refer pooping in the woods as an Edward Shin moment. And if you don't know what that means you probably haven't watched the last podcast or one of the videos I've done with Edward. We're poking a little fun with Edward here since he's not here. But
we love Edward Shin.
We do love
Edward Shin.
But yeah, we were. So how do you? So since we're on the subject, how do you handle the number 2 in the woods?
I've got a shovel, and yeah, I do it like the cats do it. Dig a little cat hole.
Little cat hole. So, all right. Well, with that, we'll again end with what comes out the end. I guess I should say I'll see you again outside.
See you again out.
We'll see you guys again outside.
Outside.
Or I'll just end it. One of the two.